You know what? I got a Polish friend who's a sound tech. I got to check one too.
It's working.
We're rolling.
Yep, we're all set.
Welcome to the 10th meeting of the Corporate Services Committee, June 8th, 2020 at 12 p.m. This is being held as a virtual meeting during the COVID-19 emergency. I'm here at City Hall. My colleagues are joining me via Zoom. City Hall is currently closed to the public, so please view the meeting via live streaming on YouTube or our city website. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternative formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request for specific to make a request specific to this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca. So if I hadn't said it, I'll call this meeting to order, and I'll first look to my colleagues for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I'll move on to the consent items. We have two items. 2.1 is agreement between the City of London and Donald Jones Management Services, Inc. for the management of Centennial Hall. And 2.2 is the standing committee meetings and annual meeting calendar. Now, because there's some interesting changes proposed to that, that's likely to bring up some conversation. I'm going to suggest, since there are only two items, that we deal with them separately. So I'll put 2.1 on the floor and look to my colleagues, either for a mover or some comments about this. Councillor Hopkins, are you moving this item?
Yes, I'd be happy to move this item. I'd like to also just comment, I'm glad to see that we still have to make a decision as to the future of Centennial Hall, and it makes just sense to have that 90-day notice provision to terminate without cause if needed. So happy to move this.
Okay, thank you, and I believe our mayor has seconded that. Mayor Holder, are you also hoping to comment?
I think Councillor Hopkins was particularly articulate. I certainly support this and comfortable with the recommendation to proceed.
Okay, thank you. I see that Deputy Mayor Helmer would like to make a comment.
Apologies for being late. Chair, I wonder if you could just let me know where we are in the agenda. It sounds like you're talking about the Donald Jones Management Service contract. Have we dealt with any other items on the agenda yet?
No, you're not very late. We just started and we're on item 2.1. Did you have any comments with respect to that item?
I do not.
Okay. Well, thank you. So, seeing no other comments, may I ask if is there anyone on audio, just phoning in of our Councillor Kaibaga perhaps? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, she is on, just on audio.
All right.
I am here, and I don't have any comments or questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll call that question then. Okay, so let's do a roll call then. Councillor Kaibaga,
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Helmer,
Yes.
Councillor Morgan,
Yes.
Councillor Hawkins,
Yes,
Mayor Holder,
Yes.
and that motion is carried unanimously.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Yes, I voted on the screen. Thank you. Right, moving on to number 2.2, the standing committee meetings and annual meeting calendar. Colleagues, I'm sure you'd had a chance to look at this and notice that we seem to be moving to almost a 3-week cycle for council meetings. And so this was the recommendation coming from staff. Perhaps I could ask for first just some comments from our staff on that. And then we'll go to our committee members after that. Okay, so the clerk has asked, our clerk present here, Ms. Westlake.
Thank you. Through the chair, this proposal is based on the terms that are currently in the council procedure bylaw, as well as our current meeting experience with once per month for many standing committees, and then some of the meetings that we've canceled. So this is the proposal before you today.
Thank you. So I'll look for comments on this from my colleagues. I see Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Morgan afterwards.
yes, I do have a quick question for you to staff. If further council meetings are required throughout the year, what is the process, or what are the opportunities to add extra ones if needed?
Okay, I'll look to our clerk for that answer.
That process is currently addressed in the council procedure bylaw. Notice of 24 hours is required, but generally, as a practice, we would survey the members for any committee meeting to confirm adequate attendance for quorum purposes and representation, and we would move from there as special meetings are required. You may recall we've recently scheduled a special SPPC meeting for later this month to accommodate a need, so that would certainly be a process that would continue as required.
Any further questions, Councillor Hopkins? Okay, then I'll go to you, Councillor Morgan.
Yes, my question relates to just the start of this annual meeting calendar, because it's got December on there and January. Although I know that the previous calendar, was already approved. Given we're going to have to deal with an annual update process for the budget starting this fall, and it's anticipated to be done in December. I wonder if any thought has been given to reserving any sort of additional dates in December or in early January, should we, obviously after council figures out where we are when we get the update later this month, and we outline a process for how we're going to deal with what will likely be a more robust annual update, whether we want to set aside any sort of dates in reserve well in advance for any sort of a extended budget process that we may need or may not need, or maybe this is premature. So I wouldn't mind some thoughts from the treasurer and the clerks. I know that we can deal with it as one-offs, but I wonder if it would be advantageous to save some time in the calendar as if needed, so that we could cancel rather than add them in later.
Thank you. That's a great question. Perhaps we'll start with the clerk.
Thank you through the chair. The discussions that I've had thus far with finance staff have looked to October and November for budget meetings for the 2021 update. So there's nothing reflected in this calendar. Certainly council could add those if they felt it was appropriate. And I'll throw it back over to the treasurer, because I think there's been some additional discussion since last I was in touch with finance staff.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barbone, do you have comments on this particular question?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. So we have been taking a good look at, as we've been trying to finalize our report and the update that we're bringing at the end of the month. And the more reflection that we've done to look at the timing, we think that certainly it will be challenging to bring the budget update forward in October. We believe probably the earliest that we could bring it forward is likely the end of November. Of course, that would be predicated on the number of changes or direction the council would provide to us if there was something specific that they wanted to do. But I believe at this point, pending further direction, that we would need till at least the end of November, and we're at this time at least anticipating that to allow enough public engagement with the Christmas timeframe to possibly have it approved in January. So I'd look to the clerk if you'd wish to get more council direction at this time, or through the update later on, about whether you'd like to put dates aside now or later.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, do you have further questions?
I think the treasurer had a question for the clerk. I'm really not looking to decide anything right now. I just, as we set the annual meeting calendar, I know sometimes it's easier to schedule dates in that we don't need than add them in later, but I'm open to both options. I'm just looking for our staff's best advice on how to proceed.
Thank you then. And I think Deputy Mayor Helmer, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. I wonder if, through the chair, I just asked the clerk, seems like the major change is that there'll be fewer weeks where we have corporate services and planning committee, so fewer opportunities for that, so slightly fewer meetings throughout the course of the year. And I'm a little concerned about the size of the agenda for those remaining committee meetings. How do the staff who are reporting into those areas feel about the kind of workload that would be going into each of the meetings if there are going to be fewer of them, especially when it comes to corporate services and planning, which tend to meet at a higher frequency than the others?
Okay, Madam Clerk.
I'll defer to any of the senior leadership team that are on this meeting, but we have not received any comments since this has been circulated in the agenda that I'm aware of. I know the clerk is also on if she has any further comment.
This is Kathy. I haven't received any comments either.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Helmer, perhaps I'll allow you to continue.
Okay. So I'm not opposed to trying something slightly different, and the 3-week cycle, it's really keeping the number of SPPC and council meetings pretty much the same, and it's just pulling out a couple of the opportunities where we would normally have additional corporate services and planning type meetings. I think as long as the meetings are relatively short and the agenda for the meetings is manageable, I think moving to this number of meeting opportunities is going to be fine. But I do think it's something we need to keep an eye on. Just to give you a sense, in many of the years over the past, we've not had fewer than 20 corporate services meetings throughout the year, and we're not contemplating to have anywhere near that number here. I think it's something like maybe 16 or something like that. So it's substantially fewer because we're not scheduling them all out. I think as long as we approach it with the idea that sometimes we're going to have to schedule some extra meetings. I know, for the example, with the debenture issue, we need to be flexible, make sure we can have a meeting that's going to meet the timelines. I'm a little wary of reducing the frequency to the point where it becomes difficult to work with from a staff perspective, in terms of meeting the timelines, getting things decided in a timely way. The time between a committee meeting and a council meeting is now stretching out quite a bit because there's the SPPC week in between. And so I want to make sure that that actually works as well. So I guess what a long way of saying, I'm willing to see how it goes, but I'm a little skeptical about this particular change. And I think we need to really monitor it carefully to see how it's actually working. If it works well and there's fewer meetings, excellent. I think that could be a good improvement. But if it's starting to result in longer meetings, less flexibility for people to get decisions made by a council, too much delay between the committee meeting and the council meeting, that could be a bit of a problem. And I did want to flag this would sort of formally resolve the issue that Councillor Morgan has been after for a while, which is more time between SPPC and council. And I think it gives the community an expectation about when those things are going to happen, and it's not as confusing as seeing the meeting and then having to track it to the following council meeting. That's just harder for people to keep up with. So I'm willing to support it here, but I'm a little cautious about it.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Cassidy, welcome to our meeting. You have some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I share the concerns that the Deputy Mayor has raised, and two in particular with regard to the Planning Committee. I know in summers past, when we reduce generally the number of meetings and extend the time in between meetings, we have in the past have had Planning Committee meetings running till 3 o'clock in the morning. That has happened. I know that we lately have been doing things a little bit differently, but again, it really depends on who's chairing the meeting. And so Councillor Hawkins began this sort of way of doing things, and I've continued with it, where we don't necessarily need a full staff presentation for every planning application that comes before us. We've all read the reports, or should have read the reports, so we're all up to speed on what it says. We don't need staff to present exactly what's in the report every single time, unless there is community interest and people in the gallery that would like to hear the staff presentation. So that's one concern with planning, is trying to cram too much in. But my bigger concern is meeting the timelines that were required to under the Planning Act. So I'd like to hear from planning staff about that. So the previous provincial government extended the timelines, and now the current provincial government has gone back and undone that. So we now have reduced timelines again, where council must make a decision on planning applications. So with these fewer meetings, do staff have concerns about meeting those requirements under the Planning Act?
Thank you very much, Councillor Cassidy. We're just checking now to see if we've got some planning staff online with us.
Mr. Chair, it's Lynn Livingston, and if I can't figure out how to raise my hand, sorry, so that you can see it.
Okay, well, delight to have you on the line, Ms. Livingston. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to make two comments. One, I can commit that SLT will, and we do this already, work to manage the volume for council for each of the meetings. We try to plan the agendas accordingly, and we would work to do our very best in this new cycle of meetings. I have not spoken to planning staff, so if council or this committee is not comfortable at this point in time, I would be happy to undertake that conversation and report back at the next meeting or at the council meeting to help inform your discussions.
Thank you. I believe that would be most helpful. I'm looking now to Councillor Hawkins.
Yes, thank you. I too share the concerns that have already been expressed, and hearing Ms. Livingston speak about how that conversation, and I'm speaking specifically to the planning agenda. Is there an opportunity through you to staff, to city clerk, that we could just defer this item until we get further comments from planning staff before we approve the calendar?
Thank you. Why don't I ask our clerk for the answer to that question?
Thank you. Through the chair, certainly the committee could defer a decision on this to council and do it at the council meeting, or alternatively, you could refer it to your next meeting and have some additional discussion between now and the next meeting. We do have a requirement for the clerk to report out with a schedule before the end of June, so we've met that timeline, and we have some time to make the decision, certainly.
Thank you. Looking to Deputy Mayor Helmer now.
I think I'd like to move a referral just to the next Corporate Services Committee meeting. I think that's reasonable. It's not a burning urgent issue that we have to resolve right now, and I think getting a little bit more feedback on it would be helpful. So I'll move a referral, and then we can deal with it at our next meeting instead of having a longer discussion today and then also another longer discussion potentially at council and another longer discussion at committee. Let's just refer it, and we have more discussion at the next meeting.
Thank you. So that's moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer and seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any comments or questions about the referral, colleagues? Okay, so there's a motion to refer. I'll call the question on that motion to refer this item to the next meeting of the Corporate Services Committee. And we're ready for that, so I'll go to Councillor Kaibaga.
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yes.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Closing the vote, that motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the consent items. That takes us to number 3, the scheduled items. There are none. We have one item for direction. It's the first report of the County City Liaison Committee. So I'll look for comments. I believe that's to be received, but I think we have some members of our committee that were in attendance and may be able to make some comments. I'll look to our committee. Okay, Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. First, I'm prepared to move to receive. I would say to colleagues that a couple of whom are members who are on this call now that this is the first time in some 8 years, I believe, that the City County Liaison Committee has met. I thought there was tremendous goodwill in the meeting. I thought there was candor, and I think it was a helpful, progressive discussion to the point that we have agreed that the next meeting that will take place is on June the 17th, speaking specifically to the issues around EMS and our paramedic services and the whole discussion that certainly our council has had around this before. I've had communication from the warden of Middlesex County, who has indicated that another discussion will and should be the issues around social housing as it relates to Middlesex County. I have certainly suggested that be and directed that be as per the motion that was approved in the meeting, that the first meeting will simply be on EMS and paramedic and, services, and that this is something that we could deal with in a subsequent meeting. It might again be a small, quicker, specific meeting to be determined. But I wanted to let colleagues know that June 17th at noon will be the next discussion. It will be specifically on the subject.
Thank you. So I'll look for a seconder for this, to receive this report, and any further comments? Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I won't repeat anything the mayor said. I think he captured the meeting and some comments very well. What I do want to ask, well, I want to mention and then ask the clerk if she can comment on, is so for colleagues, you know that this is not a decision-making body, but a body that will report regularly back through to both municipal councils. And so this particular report, drafted by our staff, because the committee is clerked by the City of London clerk, is a document that will go to both councils, is my expectation. I just want to confirm with the clerk that that's the case. And then any decisions or recommendations that the committee makes, which obviously will come as recommendations to both councils, would come through a similar process, just to set the stage for expectations on how the work of that committee will flow through both councils. I wonder if the clerk could comment briefly.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Morgan. I'll look to our clerk for that answer.
It's Kathy. Yes, the minutes of that meeting have been shared with the clerk of the County of Middlesex, and they will receive the report at their meeting next week, or no, tomorrow, June the 9th. So yes, both councils will be aware and be brought up to date and forwarded the minutes after each meeting.
Thank you. Did you have further comments, Councillor Morgan?
Only that I would thank the clerk and her staff for their work on this.
I believe Deputy Mayor Helmer would like to make a comment.
Nope.
I'm sorry. Okay. And I see Councillor Hawkins has her hand up. And I'm sorry, Deputy Helmer, I thought I saw your hand. Were you willing to second that motion? Is that?
That's what I was doing. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so that motion moved and seconded, and I'll go to Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. And I do have a quick question for you. I was really pleased to read the report and get the report, so I want to thank staff for doing that. Is there a regular meeting time, or how many times does this committee meet a year? Are there any specifications to they must meet once or twice a year, or how many reports can we expect from?
Can you answer that?
From this committee in the future?
All right, thank you. I'll look to Clerk Saunders for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based on the current memorandum of understanding, it's at the call of the chair, but 4.1 of the report suggests that some changes be made to the memorandum of understanding, and that revision would be brought forward to allow for a more regular meetings, and also to ensure that they meet after in the first year after election to review the memorandum of understanding and also to meet around our budget timelines of both municipalities to ensure that there's some discussion of budget. So in response to 4.1 at a future meeting, a revised MOU will be brought forward for consideration of the committee.
Thank you for that information, and I'll leave it up to the committee to figure that out with as they look at changes to the memorandum. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much, Chair. Certainly, more than once every 8 years is an improvement. So as we go forward, knowing that we just recently met and are now dealing with a specific issue, and it may well even be, colleagues, that we're in a position that as a result of another specific issue, we'll meet again before the required timeline established in our agreement. And I think, honestly, I think this will be, I think this is exceptionally positive. I think what it means is that there's a willingness between both sides to have stronger dialogue. Certainly the relationship between the county and the city is an important one. I think we've all certainly acknowledged that. And there's more that binds us together in terms of issues beyond geography. And I would anticipate that certainly in the shorter term, that there will be there may well be some meetings beyond the statutory requirement, simply as we deal with things, and we'll see how that settles out over time. But listen, I think the fact that we started is great progress, and we go from there. So steps at a time. By the way, let me also thank colleagues who are members of the committee, certainly our clerk who's clerking, but let me acknowledge Councillor Morgan, Councillor Turner, and Deputy Mayor Helmer as our alternate, all being part of that as well. I think it was important to have us all there, and thank you for the work you've done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, we'll call that question. It's prepared. Councillor Kayabaga. Councillor Kayabaga. Okay, she seems to be on mute. Okay, we'll come back. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Yes.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yes.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
And I'm yes, and we'll see if Councillor Kayabaga are. So I'm afraid we're not able to get a vote from Councillor Kayabaga. So.
Closing the vote, and the motion's passed 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to deferred matters and additional business. There are no deferred matters. Are there any items of additional business? Seeing none, that brings us to the confidential section, and it's going to take us a few minutes to prepare this. Oh, we need a motion, yes, thank you. So I'll look for a motion to move into confidential session, moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Morgan. And so we'll call that question. And that's prepared to go. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I just wanted to let you know that Councillor Kayabaga is in the meeting and is trying to unmute, but it's not possible. So we should probably fix that when we go into closed session. I'm in favor of going into closed session.
Okay. Thank you. And Councillor Morgan.
Yes.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes.
Mayor Holder.
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, thank you. And Councillor Kaibaga will work on a method to have you vote.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Thanks, Barb, for unmuting me. My button here is not working, so yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.